Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Well, that was already a really interesting conversation. I'm Kurt Peleman, Europe Director at AVPN, calling in from Belgium. I'm delighted that you join us today. And with this I mean each and one of you. But rest assured, you are not alone. And to get a better sense of who else is here, it would be great if you could introduce yourself in the community chat room. Reading the chat box will soon feel like making a trip around the world in 30 seconds. You are joining us for the last session of our Gender Day, and it has already been an inspiring day with new insights and hopefully also new connections. And I'm confident that our upcoming session on why we need to keep fighting for women's economic empowerment will be the cherry on the cake. In this last session, we will explore the initiatives that corporates, foundations, and investors from across the region are deploying to empower women and how they are working with their beneficiaries, employees, and investees to overcome setbacks. I'm aware that for most of you, this is probably not the first session you join, but we all know how important it is to invest time to make newcomers feel welcome. So please allow for some repetition. First, a few words about AVPN. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia. So you can say we are an ecosystem builder, but we are also a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. And we provide our community opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. As Europe Director, I'm happy and proud to say that we have more than 50 members with their headquarters in Europe. Second, some housekeeping rules. If you're finding that the webcam video is facing a lag, it is better to pause the video. You can do this by hovering over the image. Here and now, that would be my face. The app version, Adobe Connect, normally offers the best user experience. If at any point you get disconnected or have a bad connection, log out of the app and then log back in. Or if you're using the browser, refresh the page. Please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording from our website, conference.avpn Asia. We are aware that you will have a lot of questions, and we have reserved 15 minutes for those. Type your questions in the Q&A pod, and we will convey these questions to our speakers. As advance warning, past experience is that the speakers may not be able to respond to all your questions. We are sharing highlights of our day live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, so don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtag AVPN2020. At the bottom of the screen, you also find reading materials that you can download or refer to. And finally, for those participants with full access, it is possible to chat with speakers and fellow delegates in these sessions through the AVPN connector. The link may be found in the resource section. And now I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of this session, Dayong Lee. Dayong is an associate partner at Dalberg, where she leads many gender engagements across Asia, and this includes landscaping the opportunities for female entrepreneurship in Southeast Asia, as well as supporting the design of one of Asia's first gender lens impact investment funds. Dayong, over to you.
Great, thanks Kurt. Hi everyone. Am I on video? Not sure. That was wonderful. Unfortunately, I think my video camera did not adjust well to Adobe Connect, so you'll see me blown up a little bigger than I intended, so apologies in advance, and I may pause video if it becomes a bit distracting. But to kick this off, I think we all know that COVID has affected every single one of us. But unfortunately, I think what's becoming more and more clear is that it has really exposed and exacerbated some of the most entrenched inequalities that women and girls face. Over the course of the day, I think we've explored a number of different dimensions of these unequal impacts in earlier sessions, in education and in health, for example. And in this session, we'll really build on some of the perspectives that Julianne have shared with us around the gendered economic impacts, for those of you who were able to listen in on that interview. And I just wanted to share a couple of key findings from a recent UN Women study, which showed that even though the death rate of COVID has been higher for men so far, the economic lives of women and girls have been disproportionately affected in almost every single way. First of all, unpaid care work burdens have increased with schools shutting down, with the elderly populations requiring more attention. Globally, even pre-COVID, women have been doing 3 times as much of this work as men. And in countries like India, where I'm based, this difference rises to as much as 10 times. And so all of this added work has really fallen on the shoulders of women and girls, taking time away from income-generating activities or learning. And second, as Julianne has also shared, women are often overrepresented in extra vulnerable sectors like informal work, domestic work, healthcare, hospitality, retail, which is especially true for lower income countries. And they also have less access to critical assets to cope with the pandemic as well as to bounce back, such as technology, capital, land. And this digital divide has held women back from accessing remote learning opportunities, work, direct benefit transfers, or entrepreneurs from transitioning to e-commerce platforms, for example, as easily as their male counterparts. And as a result, we see that women are dropping out of the workforce more, earning less, saving even less, slipping more into poverty, and potentially to never return to work or school again. And our team in Delberg has been working hard to launch a large-scale survey across more than 15,000 households in India, covering over 15 states, to dive really deeper into some of these gender impacts of COVID. But I think we all already know that if we don't act now, there will be devastating consequences. At the same time, I think I've been inspired so far, as echoed by many folks during the ADPN conference. A crisis like this also represents an opportunity to build back not only better, but differently. There have been many new entry points where norms change, for example, as families are spending more time together, men and boys are stuck at home as much as perhaps girls and women, for example. And I'm really excited that we have a powerful group of panelists today with us who are at the forefront of fighting for women's economic empowerment across Asia. And we'll be exploring why this fight is more important now than ever before and how we can build back not only better, but differently. So before I hand it over to our panelists, I'd love to get a quick sense of who's in the room and who's not, and thanks everyone for already dropping their introductions in the community chat. But I just have a couple of questions to kick us off. Sangeeta, could we launch our first poll, please? Thanks so much. The first question for you, just to get a sense of how you are feeling in the room, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is a threat, 5 is an opportunity. Does COVID-19 present more of a threat or an opportunity for women's economic empowerment? Give it another 5 more seconds. Great, I think we have most of the responses. And it sounds like there are a few folks who are optimistic, about 20 of you, but the vast majority, 70 of you or so or more, are feeling like it's more of a threat than an opportunity. Can we go to the next question, please? What is your professional background? Great to see. So this tells us that about 40% of you are from the NGO sectors, and we have some researchers, consultants as well, and a few policymakers as well as donors in the room. And our final question is, what gender do you identify with? Okay, I think we have more or less our answer here. Thanks, Sangeeta, for that. So close to 80% female, 20% male, with a few who are gender non-conforming, gender variant. So this last question I always like to ask in this virtual setting. Polls are really helpful for that, because I think it underscores an important point of not only who's in the room, but who's also not in the room. This is definitely not the worst gender distribution I've seen. Recently, it was a lot worse than this, but going forward, of course, I think it's all our wish to also see more of our male colleagues and friends participate in these discussions. Fantastic. And so now that we have a bit of a sense of who's in the room, we'd love to get started with introductions to our amazing group of panelists here today. Just in the interest of time, I know that you all have such rich experiences to share, but it'd be great if you can keep it under 2 minutes and introduce yourself, your organization, as well as the main ways your organizations have been responding to COVID. Maybe we can just go in alphabetical order, starting with Julia, then Shanta and Veronica.
Thanks Dae-Young, and thanks to AVPN. I'm so pleased to be here today, and I'm just delighted to be on this panel with Veronica and Shanta. Interesting to see 80% women in the room and about 40% people from NGOs, and I do think NGOs have really pushed gender equality, and it's really time for business and government to be more serious. So I'm currently CEO of the Australian government-funded initiative called Investing in Women. We're halfway through a 7-year program to increase economic opportunities for women in Southeast Asia. We work in the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Myanmar. And there's 3 ways in which we're working. Firstly, we're supporting large employers to use evidence-based tools to improve gender equality in their workplaces. Secondly, we're working with impact investors to address implicit and explicit bias within their organizations and providing funds specifically for investing in women-owned and led SMEs. Part of this work is also to partner with ecosystem builders such as AVPN to take the practical knowledge that we're generating to a wider audience. And the third part of our work is addressing gender norms, the gender norms which underlie discrimination against women in the workplace. So this is around women being continually seen primarily as caregivers and homemakers, and men being seen as the primary breadwinners. These stereotypes harm both women and men, and we're working with a range of different local partners to catalyse change. So how has COVID-19 impacted on us? Well, in March and April, we reviewed our entire program, and we've done some reorientation to really account for how the world has changed. But I also would like to mention we funded some research to really look at the impact of previous health and economic crises on women's economic opportunities. And I look forward to the opportunity to talk a bit more about that later on. Fundamentally, the motivation for this work is inclusive economic growth and better business outcomes. Across the world, we've made lots of progress towards gender equality in education and health, but we're still really lagging on economic outcomes and political representation. But the evidence is here, and it's already been mentioned by Dae-Young and Julian Guevara before that. Gender equality brings better business outcomes and stronger economic growth. So why are so many companies and so many countries ignoring this potential competitive advantage? Really, it's time for change, and that's why we still need to keep fighting for women's economic empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. I think Shanta may have a bit of trouble with her technology, so we're going to actually go to Veronica first and then come back to Shanta.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone and around the world. My name is Veronica Kalondam from Indonesia, and I'm a social entrepreneur, founder and CEO of YCAP, which actually an Indonesian abbreviation of Yayasan Cinta Anak Bangsa. Yayasan is the word for foundation, and Cinta Anak Bangsa is Loving the Nation's Children Foundation. So we are built out of love and called to love others through this foundation that I set up 21 years ago. Our focus, we have two focuses, is to address the issue of education and economic empowerment for women, for the mothers of our students. So we kind of connect the microfinance type of empowering financial inclusion, and with the little condition that their children has to stay in school under the rate loan. And we want to encourage that because we believe that the education is the one that will break the poverty cycle in a sustainable way. So we work with mothers, and we have worked with more than 150,000 mothers, their poor families, and help put back thousands of kids into school system. And we are at this point during COVID, we really are in the mode of helping these women to build the experience, to keep, continue with their business in this difficult time, while having to be homemaker as well, because most of their children are actually at home now doing digital schooling, and that's just an added type of what Young said, work for women in this time of COVID, and that's why building their resilience is very, very much in need and very much important. And we launch for that. We launch a program that we call Light Up. The idea is to help their electricity bill for the people that we serve. It's an actually ultra micro community. They spend about 15% on their monthly expense to pay electricity. So by raising funds to help them with their electricity bill, we're helping them to kind of use that budget to buy food instead, and they can kind of feed a family for like 5 to 7 days. That's the kind of the equal, $8 a month that will buy them rice for 5 to 7 days. So it's a very simple kind of approach, but I know this will take a longer run to really help them come back to the economy and stability. But we are all doing this with love, and that's the whole motto of our organization, to do this sustainably and do it with love.
Thanks, Veronica. Love the approach of doing it sustainably, but also with love, which is much needed during these times. Shanta, are you back on now?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good.
Great. It'd be great if we can get your introduction as well.
Yeah, hi everybody, and it was great hearing the panelists, both Veronica and Julia. And Dayong, as usual, you're amazing. Whatever little we've interacted, I think it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sangeeta and Diana, for having given me so much of hassles for us to log in. So I thought I'd start with just saying hello to all the audience, and I love the poll. So that sets the stage on us as well, to be prepared with all the questions that I'm going to pour in. Also happy to see that we have such a huge women, population listening to the panel today, and that's really a pleasure. As I embark on what we're going to cover today, let me just give you a little bit of a brief. I'm based out of Mumbai, India. I work for a bank, and I head both their HR and CSR and also the branding for the bank, because we do see a lot of synergies between the three of them. As far as gender diversity is concerned, or gender neutrality is concerned, there's a focus approach by us to make sure both at the hiring, which is at the employee base, We make sure that we hire enough and more women. So about 25% of women we hire even at middle and senior levels. That there is a targeted process for hiring for running our business. But while I say this, on the social side, we work in 4 areas. One is basically health, where we focus on retinoblastoma, which is eye cancer in children, and retinopathy, which is diabetics, which is eye trouble with the retina for diabetics. We work with education. We've set up our first school, which is the Uddhav RBL school, which is basically a girls' school. So we believe in girl empowerment and women empowerment right from the day they start their lives. So it starts from the first standard that we have made a focused approach to make girls empowered. The third thing is about our livelihood opportunities, where we support women to earn greater income so that they can support and become the bread earners of their family. All of them, all the pillars that we cover, our overarching philosophy is on women empowerment. Women empowerment is our lead in, and that's what we are working on. And that's why I head the unit as well as a woman, and I'm extremely proud to say that. I loved what Veronica said. I think it's about love, and it's about giving, and it's about caring. We're a combination of all of that as a company, and that's what makes us different and unique. Has COVID changed us a little bit? What COVID has done to us, it's early days. I think none of us are in a position to actually tell you the complete picture. But being an essential service and who goes to work every single day, barring today because I wanted to not wear the mask on this panel, that I decided to work from home. Otherwise, every day is a new day for us, and we've been going to work religiously, both men and women. And I think that's where your gender neutrality has really come up front, because today the men do a lot of work at home, and they have the same troubles that we go through. So I think it's not anymore about women empowerment. I think we should look at gender neutrality and gender empowerment. So that's all from me, Dayong, and now you can continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shanta. It's a good reminder to not only think about empowering women, but really going above and beyond to aim for neutrality and equality. Julia, I'd love to start with you. Investing in women has been learning a lot from past health and economic crises, right? How have men and women been affected differently? And can you perhaps speak a little bit about what was surprising to you from that research, if anything?
Thanks, Dayong. I mentioned this study earlier where Professor Marion Baird and Associate Professor Elizabeth Hill from Sydney University reviewed all the academic literature and the grey literature, so that's work by the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, on previous health and economic crises to look at what we should learn about different gendered impacts on that, and then draw some conclusions for what we should do during this COVID-19 crisis. And I think I was surprised at how unequivocal the findings were. So the findings were, in every one of these crises, women have fared worse than men. But it's important to understand why that's the case. And these are the reasons that have been set out. So firstly, women start off in a worse position than men. Women tend to earn less than men, they have less access to productive assets, and this limits their ability to develop their capabilities and to make strategic choices and participate on equal terms with men. It's also about segmentation of our labour markets. We know that people have strong views about what's a woman's job, what's a man's job. And so women are overrepresented in lower paid occupations that have been very vulnerable. You know, this has been called a she session. People have already mentioned that, because more women than men have lost their jobs because women predominate in retail, travel, hospitality. Another issue is sexist attitudes of employers. So they often regard women as secondary earners. And so when they're downsizing, they'll give preference to men. You know, so it's clear that women's formal employment is often very adversely affected in previous crises. And another thing is that while government policy can work to address gender inequality in recessions and crises. Frequently, it doesn't. So things like tightening of fiscal policy, which often follows a recession, or deregulation of the labour market. Do these things without reference to gendered impacts, you can further disadvantage women. So I think the other thing when we think about this crisis that's been very particular is the lockdowns that have been so common across most countries around the world, and that stay at home. So this has created an increase in unpaid work, additional cooking, cleaning, childcare, and this is traditionally viewed as women's work. So we've heard previously that we've seen that really falling predominantly to women. I think another, just sort of wrapping up, but another point that's made in this review is that recessions last a long time. And so we've got to plan for that from this outset. We need to look at 3 to 7 years. So we need to plan for the medium term, the long term, as well as we deal with the short-term crisis impacts. I think the overall finding of this review, and this one simple takeaway I hope you'll remember, is that previous health and economic crises have made pre-existing inequalities worse, and they have set gender inequality back. But it doesn't have to be like this. We know why that's occurred, and so we can make this crisis different. Let's do that. There are clear opportunities that are emerging. Lockdowns are also an opportunity to rethink flexible work, and women benefit predominantly from more flexible work opportunities. Having, as Shanta said, having men at home has been an opportunity to reallocate some of the unpaid care work. Let's reinforce that. So maybe I'll wrap up there, Dae-Young, but I think the study is COVID-19 and women's economic participation, and it's available on our website if people would like to read through it.
Julia. It's quite a grim picture that in every single one of these crises, unequivocally, in many ways, women are worse off. Veronica, you're working with some of the most vulnerable women, micro-entrepreneurs, women of students in low-income communities. What have you seen as really, in the day-to-day lives of these women, the impact of COVID?
Yeah, I think COVID is different than any other sort of like disaster the world that has ever seen, because at least in my lifetime, because everybody suffers. Any kind of business, big to small, even micro and ultra micro, of course, they are all suffer. And what I've seen in our group of micro women, micro entrepreneurs that we serve, at least 50% loss of income. Some actually came down to only 25%, with, of course, the reality that they are mouth to feed, because those with working kids, children who are already working, they got laid off, or they got, in Indonesia, there's a term that you put back into the house. You just sent back to the house. It's the way of companies actually saying that I'm going to pay only 50% of your, or 75% of your, they get 50 to 75% pay cut by staying at home. But then that's actually, for them, it's more the mother's sort of like responsibility to feed. So those who actually can pivot, those who can actually have the agility and to have other businesses to really do. I mean, for example, 70%, almost 70% of our clients are actually sell food. They sell food. So they sell food in schools, they sell food in their own homes, and they sell food in a tourist place. In tourist places and schools, when they close, definitely it's almost zero income. But we see that resilience in them. They still work very hard, and they still sell food from door to door in their community. So with all these protocols of social distancing and all that, they manage to sell at, probably 25%, 30% of their capacity. So we're looking at a very grim picture, if you will. It is true, but we also see those, the spirit, their resilience, that they pivot, they have that agility, they do something in any kind of ways to survive. And I think it is our duty to help them with a more sort of like patient, sort of like capital to get them through this difficult time. I mean, we as a company also suffer, but what the suffering level is different. For them, the suffering is about whether to live with a few days of runway, and maybe companies, we have few months or even a year of runway. So yes, we all are suffering, but we are not in the same boat. We are a different boat. So that's just the thing that I think is emerging. And we were doing everything that we can to help them and try to deploy sort of like help, like the Lights Up and all of that, the program to pay their electricity bill. But then digital is something that we need to enhance in their kind of, I think, the way they do things in life. And that's the one thing that I think very important for us to adjust to this new reality, that we need to empower them, those who actually under the poverty line or at the poverty line. They have a different way of responding to help. Even, having the intention to help is good, but those who can actually redeem this goodness is another thing, if you're talking about digital sort of like way of distributing support. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really, I think, insightful. Obviously, I think the day-to-day survival issues and challenges are no surprises, but the level of resilience, suddenly I think I got a little more space so that I'm no longer in your face. This is great. Looks like my video adjusted.
Oh.
Yeah, but the level of resilience and the ability to kind of quickly pivot to different sources of incomes during this time is pretty remarkable. And as you mentioned, Veronica, I think corporations are, of course, also hit hard during this time. And we've seen CSR budgets shrink oftentimes, or are being redeployed to quickly respond to some of the most immediate relief mechanisms. And some of the efforts that have been longstanding to support women and girls have been left behind when we've often needed them the most. So I wanted to turn it over to Shanta, as you are leading both HR but also CSR of a large bank. What kinds of financial pressures and budget pressures have you seen through COVID, if any? And how have you been able to keep girls and women at the center and as a priority?
Thanks, Deong. Just to quickly take you through, COVID hit India end of March. The financial year for India it ends in March. That's March 31st. So as a banker, it's about 7 days of COVID and lockdown for the last financial year. The real story is emitting now. It hasn't happened in the last year. We like to call it the last year while it happened this year. That's 2020. So we did a few things a little more smartly, I guess. So under the livelihood opportunities, which is anyway women empowerment, as an organization, we were supporting women in what we call the fashion designing course. And we were already supporting them for stitching and things like that to give them larger livelihoods. Simultaneously, we were also supporting another opportunity under the same NGO, where we were supporting women to provide food items. They used to manufacture them at home, and we had upgraded these people. They were normal housewives whom we upgraded and made them talented enough to sell to corporates. What we did was, our entire learning, we had moved digital with this NGO about 1.5 years ago. So we brought in the fashion designing course for making masks to the new bunch of women who were good cooks and who had basic stitching skills. and we implemented them. And what we did was we produced masks for our own employees and our business correspondents. So actually, we never went through this problem of not making them sustainable. It took them about a month and a half to really get them trained, to get them onto the job. Where I actually suffered was on the logistics of delivery of the product. I think it wasn't so much about manufacturing. I'm happy to tell you that we have manufactured 60,000 masks, which we are distributing today across our branches and our business correspondents. The masks are here to stay. What we really needed was specifications of the mask. We couldn't land up giving them a mask which was not 3-ply. So we actually tied up with a hospital, upgraded them, got the mask certified through the upgraded process, and then that's when we actually went about delivering the mask to our ultimate end user. So I think it's about being smart, leading by example, also being ahead of the curve. I think COVID is here to stay. I mean, I can't keep saying that I can't support NGOs because I have funds, but I can't give it to them because I have pressures. I have already invested in many of my NGOs over 2.5 years. That's a lot of money that's already gone in. What we're trying to convert now is capability building, because it's a great opportunity to build capability. So I run a lot of my funds for education. Education has moved completely online. Now, if you look at the challenge that I'm facing today, it's largely in the space of education of underprivileged children. So what we've done is we've started providing laptops and digital infrastructure and digital content learning. The process has begun. So that's where I may lose out time because it takes about 4 to 6 months to get them all up and about. But in the other space where you could move them quickly, I think everybody understands they need money. It's a choice between life and livelihoods. I mean, all of us are taking extreme care as far as COVID is concerned. I mean, whether you're rich or poor, everyone's got impacted. I think the rich have got impacted more because we brought the problem into the country. It wasn't a problem that came from the slums. Unlike most of the other issues in India, where we blame it on somebody else, we'll have to take cognizance of the fact that the rich kids who studied abroad and came back and the tourists are the ones who brought COVID back home. And therefore, it's our duty to lead by example and take care of our people. So even at a personal level, even at the corporate level, we have been funding, we have not done any salary cuts. We haven't taken any undue steps which will be detrimental to employees. We've definitely made sure that they get access for VPN. They are able to work from home. And we understand today, I keep repeating, is gender neutrality now. It's no more about women. It's an equal opportunity, and we are an equal opportunity employer, both at the time we fund for CSR, as well as when we take care of our employees. There is no differentiation. So we are all empowered to take our decisions. A choice that needs to be made is between life and livelihood. And it's a combination of both, Dayan. We can't separate the two for any of us, even the panelists, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's really great to hear, Shanta, just the leadership that you've shown and the pivots, the smart pivots, as well as the opportunities you've been able to build by helping organizations quickly pivot to digital solutions and so forth. And really like your observation that it can't be life or livelihoods. You really need to make sure both are in place. But yet, we spoke a lot about the different roles that the companies in the private sector are playing. Wanted to turn it over to Julia. You mentioned earlier that there have been some regressive policies or policies that really harm gender equality, such as deregulation of the labor markets, tightening of fiscal policy as governments come out of this. Now is the time where we need public sector leadership more than ever before, right? But what do gender responsive or gender transformative policies, relief schemes really look like? Those are nice, seems like terminologies that we should all embrace, but what does that mean in practice for our policymakers?
Well, I would emphasize that, tightening fiscal policy, often harms women because governments have not done the gender analysis to really understand where the impact will predominantly fall. And too often our government leadership is predominantly male and there isn't a voice of women in there. So I understand sometimes governments do have to tighten fiscal policy, but it needs to be done with a gender lens. And so, I think the key to this is women's voice, women's leadership as part of any planning for how we respond to a recession and the gender analysis. I would like to mention one of the things we've done in investing in women, which is particularly to respond to the needs of the women SMEs. So through support of our impact investors, we've invested in a group of women-owned and led SMEs over the past 4 years. And, as people have said, this is the backbone of our economies. But SMEs are facing severe pressure in this crisis because, of course, they have less cash reserves than large companies. And they've seen declining revenues, difficulties in collecting receivables. So they're facing a cash crunch. So through our impact investing partners, we learned that many of the companies we're supporting we've supported them to invest in were experiencing cash flow issues as early as March. And in April, we established what we're calling the RISE Fund, which is part of our overall $15 million of investments into women-owned and led SMEs in Southeast Asia. And there's two parts of this. So firstly, in the absence of immediate support elsewhere, the emergency relief facility serves to mitigate the short-term liquidity constraints that women's SMEs are facing, the ones that are already within our portfolio. So we've worked with partners to really evaluate which companies have a chance of surviving this downturn and coming out strongly at the other end. And then we're providing some support to meet non-discretionary expenses, payroll, rent, and so forth, determined very much on a case-by-case basis. And based on analysis of the current situation. But we're also looking to, we've also developed a resilience facility which will come online in the coming months. So we know that new business opportunities will emerge from this crisis. And we also know that men will have much easier chance of getting invested in their business ideas coming out of the recession. So we created a particular fund that will fund women entrepreneurs through our current impact investing partners who, to help build that resilience in the SME sector over time. So I think in seeking to transform gender relations and promote gender equity in this time, I think it's critical that governments and the private sector really do the gender analysis and make sure that women's leadership is present. And we can't help but notice that women's leadership in countries where that's obvious, those countries have actually done better on the whole than the average country in the world, which is dominated by men. So ensuring gender equality in our highest levels of political decision making is going to lead to better outcomes from this incredibly difficult time that the world is grappling with.
Thanks, Julia. I think we had a really rich discussion around the impact of COVID on women as entrepreneurs, workers, the importance of women stepping up as leaders and decision makers. And now I wanted to turn it over to the audience Q&A. We've been receiving a number of really thoughtful questions, and one that really spoke to me. So far, we've discussed a lot about women at work. And to reach the next level of gender neutrality that Shanta talked about, I think there's an equally important discussion point that's often left out. What about men at home? How do we begin to shift gender norms around men as breadwinners and women as caregivers that Julia earlier mentioned as well? I think there was a comment around thanking Veronica for the acknowledgement that the extra responsibility of mothers at the education, children's education and at home can be very tough. So I'll just open it up to any of the panelists who want to take this question. What about men at home? How do we encourage that?
I think as soon as the women start earning well, the men will stay at home. So some of the research that we've done on the corporate side, shows that women in the middle to senior management tend to drop out of workforce. And while the organizations have supported them completely to make it happen, they still step out of workforce. And what could be the obvious reasons on why they step out of workforce? It's largely because their husbands start doing very well. And that's come as a standard line as to why people leave. And it's not so much, and some of them don't even plan to have a family or are not caregivers. And we did a research to find that out. And they said, my husband does well now and I don't intend to work any longer. Now the research is around the BFSI space. So I like to restrict that to that extent because Julia probably would have lots of research around gender neutrality and gender empowerment. But I would like to focus on the research that we've done because the industry that I work for is BFSI. Now the strange part is, one of the things that we've learned the hard way is that you lead by example. You can show that as a woman, I have faced similar issues at work, and that's why I've reached this level by doing all the things right. So we started this campaign of lessons of leadership by women. Now what happens when men listen to these conversations? When men listen to these conversations, they start relating that your problem and my problem is no different. In our minds, we have compartmentalized both the genders. Honestly, in a professional environment, it really doesn't make a difference as to whether the men are at home. It's a mindset issue. In India, the men are expected to go to work because we were conditioned from birth to believe that the men were bread earners and the woman was the caregiver or the family person. It's a lot to do with the culture of where you grow up, what's your upbringing, and what does your society demand of you. What is the good part that's happened thanks to COVID? And I must admit, and I must thank all the men who work for me as well, that they've understood that women are better multitaskers. We are able to do so many things, and I don't think we talk a lot about our multitasking capability. So when you want to get the men back at home to work, they need to develop the skill of multitasking. Manage a baby, manage your home, manage the kitchen, and also do a great professional endeavor. I think that's going to be the single biggest challenge. So I'm going to get on to embarking on a journey on how can men be at home, work from home, and learn multitasking. And as women, what we really need to understand is we are professionals first. If you're in an organizational setup or you're a micro business entrepreneur. And therefore, our profession needs to have equal weightage and should not be treated as separate from our personal needs, because we are so good at multitasking. We can keep a home as well as manage a profession and also provide both life and livelihood, which is the common theme that I'm running in my organization, because everything about us is a combination of both. So it's a long answer for a short question. But, I just want to say that, it's about gender neutrality now. It's no more about men at home. Men will go back home because their livelihood and their life is equally precious as much as the women are. So they will have to work from home, get used to doing things at home, and then bring the true picture out for us.
Thanks, Shanta. From investing in women's work on gender norms, anything to add, Julia?
I think gender norms can be incredibly deeply embedded in our psyche. And we've done we funded a study on masculinity in Vietnam, which really showed that men believe they are only good men if they have good earning potential. And so I think too often, there is some very deeply embedded views that society put around us about a good woman is primarily someone who really is a good wife and mother, and a good man is someone who brings in good money. So, but we also know that the millennial generation want to see the rigid norms. They want to see them shifted, and that is an opportunity. It's important to highlight, it's important to have champions, and I think Shanta has highlighted how they're creating champions to men who will stand up and say, yes, I'm helping out at home. So it becomes normalized within your social circle for men to help their wives at home, because often it's stigmatized. Men who do what's seen as women's work can be stigmatized. So we do need champions. We need to understand who blocks those norms from shifting, and it is very context specific. I think a crisis disrupts norms. Families have to survive, and so that does mean, while the women's jobs have disappeared, they might go into non-traditional jobs. If a man loses his job, he may actually see that to survive, he must support his wife's work. And so how do we highlight champions and the benefits of those changes and the benefits of gender equality through this crisis, rather than just looking at the pain of that some of those unwanted changes are causing?
Yeah. Thanks, Julia. I think it's important for us to take a little bit of that opportunity lens and think a bit about how COVID also can start to shift some of those norms, and really appreciated your thoughts around creating champions among men. I wanted to get to one last audience question and perhaps turn it over to our panelists for some closing thoughts. But there was, I think, both Veronica and Shanta have mentioned the importance of technology as the lockdown has continued for many places, and the importance of on-ground organizations to pivot to technology-driven models. So a question from the audience around, what have you really seen as best practice in leveraging technology, either for micro entrepreneurs to run their businesses, or I guess both of you are also working in the education space, so in really launching video courses or whatever that may be, educational content, in a way that doesn't deepen the access divide for those who don't have good access. Have you seen some best practices there?
Yeah, well, Do-Young, thank you. I think your word is right, the divide. Yeah, we look at, we serve those underprivileged, urban poor, about $2 per capita income. And with the program that we actually launched during COVID, there we actually realized that there are a divide between them, even those with access to just a small technology like smartphone and those without. And we found out that only 25% to 30% of our women clients actually have smartphone. So imagine how difficult it is to communicate with them, because from the product level, we have to innovate, right? From physical meeting to a digital meeting, moving that weekly meeting to a WhatsApp group. If they don't have a smartphone, we can't even have a WhatsApp group to begin with. So we were quite stunned at the reality that majority of our women do not actually have access to technology. Mothers, they're just the best creature, right? They probably have some kind of smartphone at home. Their children may have it, their husband may have it, but they are the last. This is like the last kind of expense that they want to a takeaway, for them to have a smartphone. I don't know the case in India, Shanta, but here it's very low penetration, I think. This is for urban poor that we serve. We don't even talk about village. So that is just how we need to kind of realize if we want to do anything, we want to innovate something, it only works for those with some access to technology. Of course, we can have their leaders or their group leader to kind of talk to their other members, but then again, it will violate that social distancing policy during this time, or the semi-lockdown that we have in Indonesia. So it's something that we really have to think about, because the effectiveness of our program, it really depends on the kind of technology that they have. In our case, we really need to innovate, even thinking about technology, because educating them. Now that if they have the smartphone, but their level of comprehension, we created like a Google Docs, questionnaires and all of that. They can read, but they don't understand what the question is. So they can't even pick the answer from the multiple choices that we gave. So we're dealing with that kind of level of education, I guess, or literacy, I guess, to begin with. So that's the saddest part that I actually see, and then I kind of have to come to peace with the group of the people that we can actually intervene with some kind of technology. So that's our greatest learning. So any innovation should be around that capability, I guess. And from the education side, we've been running WhatsApp classes with email and all of that, because again, if they have a smartphone, they don't have the enough telephone credit to watch video. This is a very, I think the language of those who actually can afford that kind of telephone credit that enables video watching in the education setting. So that's another thing that we need to kind of innovate, but innovate within that border of limitation. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Veronica. I've been told by the AVPN team that we are out of time, so apologies. I did want to give our panelists a minute for closing thoughts, but I think we have just lots of gems of advice from shifting from women's economic empowerment to gender neutrality, to not only think about women at work, but really thinking about men at home and creating champions amongst them, leveraging innovations, but thinking about all the boundaries in which women on the ground are facing, to leverage those innovations and make it a reality for those women. From Veronica on the technology question was really fantastic. And so hopefully we started this session quite pessimistic that COVID is more of a threat than an opportunity, but with a lot of rich insights and lessons from the past, as well as live lessons from how all of these organizations and leaders are dealing with the pandemic for women and girls and for men and boys. Have shifted your mindsets around some of the opportunities as well, so at the macro level policy, but and also the minute day-to-day level of formulating WhatsApp groups and so forth. So it's been a real pleasure. I wanted to thank all of our panelists, Julia, Shanta, Veronica. Thanks for sharing your rich experiences. And thanks to the audience for sticking on with us late into your evening Singapore time. And thanks to the AVPN team for this opportunity to have a conversation on this really important topic.
Thank you, Dayung, Julia, Shanta, Veronica. That was really a session full of women power. As a man and a father of 2 daughters, I learned a lot, so thank you for that also. One of my takeaways is that key to what we do is ultimately so simple: caring, loving, and sharing. And sharing we did in this session because more than 300 participants listened in. This session was made possible with the kind support of our lead partners, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Yidan Prize, our knowledge partners Ford Foundation and Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I would like to give another reminder that you are invited to share your highlights on this session on social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN2020. With this session, we concluded the Gender Day of the conference, the day which started 11 hours ago. We hope you enjoy the sessions and the connections. As Naina already mentioned in the video, AVPN recently launched a gender platform on which you will find more info in the resource section. The gender platform is the place to identify synergies with our members to scale gender equality, connect with women-led enterprises, explore initiatives to support women and girls, and share your blogs, case studies, and success stories. Tomorrow, we make space for another very important theme, climate. We will start today at 8 a.m. Singapore time with a session on structuring investment products for climate action. Before we leave you, we all know that knowledge and data matter, so please fill in the quick survey to share with us any feedback you may have on this session. Thank you in advance for that. Enjoy the rest of the day and evening, but that being said, the whole AVPN team can't wait to meet you again tomorrow. For now it is bye from Belgium.